Hello everyone, John Schiltz from the Lake Elmo Inn, owner and chef. Today I'm going to continue on with my Thanksgiving trilogy. I've showed you how to cut up a turkey, I've showed you how to cook a turkey, and now I want to show you how to make the gravy. And the gravy is going to be done with the bones and the mirepoix and all the herbs and seasonings like bay leaf and thyme and peppercorn and parsley. That's all into the stock. And if you follow me, we're going to go tap some of that stock. I know that you don't have kettles like this at home, but in a regular soup kettle, in a stock pot, you can make your own stock from those bones. If you do cut that turkey up a day ahead of time in the raw state, you have all those bones to make your stock. And you can have that all done and ready to go, and it'll take you only 20-30 minutes to make this gravy from cold. You're going to see it done here in about 5 minutes after we get it going. And I have a very fine china cap here, and because I don't want any of the parsley or any of the specks in my stock. So I'm bringing my stock over, it's hot, I'm turning that on, and now here's the controversy. For a place like us, we have 800-900 people coming in on Thanksgiving. And how do we want to do the gravy? Do we want to make it gluten-free, or do we want to do the traditional roux, which is butter and flour? So I'm going to make you this roux first and show you how it is. You take your flour, all-purpose flour, and I believe you can use gluten-free flours. It's just different. And if you're not used to it, and the first couple times I tried a gluten-free flour, I had a difficult time because I wasn't quite sure how it was going to react or how it thickens up. I do know how roux works, and I do know how cornstarch works, and you can use things like a whitewash, which is flour and water. That's another thickening agent, but that's gluten. Or you can use arrowroot, which is a plant-based, and that is the finest, probably. It's finer than cornstarch and a lot more expensive. But it is a high-quality thickening agent that works quite nice. So I add butter and I add flour to this, and I'm making my roux. And I don't want any lumps in it, so I'm going to let this, I'm whipping it up, and I'm going to let this cook. And I don't want it to burn. And my stock is already boiling because it came out of a hot stock pot. And then I'm going to go over here to my cornstarch. And my cornstarch, I'm not going to need a lot for this. Excuse me, just for a second. But here you want to add water. And you don't need to have a ton. You just want enough to thaw, to dissolve the cornstarch. Because again, you don't want any lumps. So what we're going to do is probably do this gluten-free, just to show you that it has a different look. When you do a roux, it adds depth to the sauce. It's not translucent, but when you use cornstarch in Chinese cooking, you see all their sauces are real translucent. It's because they're using cornstarch or another plant-based thickening agent. But they do not use roux. Now France and French cooking, it's all about the roux because the butter is such a high quality, old-fashioned way of doing it, and the flour. And then cooking your roux, there's a blonde roux and there's a brown roux. Now if you go down into the New Orleans area, you're going to have different stages of roux being cooked, from very blonde down to really dark, and that'll help flavor their sauces and their dishes. But here, all I want to get is, if you can see this foam around the edge, that's my cooked roux. And you see how glossy it is in the middle? That's not cooked yet. So I want to cook it so it doesn't taste like flour, my sauce. Because if you've ever had a real thick gravy or a sauce, and at Thanksgiving time, it isn't a big issue because we're all just happy to be at the Thanksgiving table, and it's going to taste great. But in my business, people can get critical, and I don't want it to taste like flour. So I've done a lot of changes here at the restaurant to try to compensate for the gluten-free allergies, the celiacs, and people that just want to cut back. And our soup that is our wild rice and duck soup, which is our one that I can't take off my menu. I had a young lady that asked me if I could do that gluten-free, and I did, and I've been doing it now for 6 years. And it's great. It's absolutely great, and it just looks a little different. If that doesn't bother you, that's not so bad. So now look, it's all foam, it's all cooked, and then you just let it keep cooking, but you don't walk away because you can burn it so quickly if you don't keep stirring it. But we're not going to use that, but I wanted to show you. Again, butter adds a lot of flavor to this, but the gluten takes away from someone in the family that might not be able to have it. So I'm using cornstarch. So the stock is boiling, as you can see, and that's the true method of telling how much to put in. You're going to put a little bit in at a time, and you're going to let it come back to a boil. And when it comes back to a boil, that's as thick as that sauce is going to get, or that stock is going to get. You're going to, if you don't bring it back to a boil, when you reheat it or later on, it's going to get thicker and thicker, and it could be very muddy. And if that's the case, you're going to need to add more stock or more liquid of some kind, and it could be as simple as water. So it's boiling right now, but it's not thick enough for me. So we're going to add a little bit more. So now I'm going to get a ladle, and I'm just going to see if I think it's thick enough. And I think that's just about perfect for what I want to do. Now, some people might not think that's a thick enough or a dark enough stock. Okay, your stock, if the bones are roasted a little bit more, you'll get more color in your stock, and it'll be a little bit darker. This looks very kind of almost anemic because I can see through it, and it's not dark enough. So I'm not going to say most, but they sell a little bottle of what they call kitchen bouquet. Okay, kitchen bouquet looks like this, but they sell it in little bottles at the store. And then you're just going to add a few drops. Come on over and take a look at what's going to happen to this. We're going to add a few drops. It's very strong. You see how dark it made that? And I suggest you don't pour the bottle over the kettle, because a lot of times people get bumped, it slips, and they dump too much in, and then it's not very attractive. And then when you're making a roux sauce, or even this, I like to have it boil out, so I don't get a lot of the roux balls, or I don't have, yeah, I did say roux balls, but it's roux that forms little balls in the stock, and it gives you lumpy gravy. Okay, so if the roux is cooked right, you get it in and you're whipping it at the same time, hopefully to prevent those roux balls. You're not going to get it from cornstarch, not really. So it's been boiling, and I'd like to bring it down. I'd like to get it a little bit thinner than I want it, and then bring it down to the thickness that I want, instead of thickening it up right away and then having to turn it off. So with that, I'm going to take our turkey that there's your gravy. And again, if I had it with the roux, it wouldn't look so glossy. But you have that flavor of butter in there. That adds a lot to it, especially if you've been brought up on the French style of cooking. So gravy can be made very easily. You make that stock a day ahead of time, you bring it back to a boil. You don't put your thickening agent in there until it's boiling, and then you whip vigorously to start with. And if, let's say, you have all those little balls of flour floating around or in there, if you have an immersion blender, a little wand, you can put that in there, and they'll disappear. And those little roux balls, what happens with them is when they finally open up or break down, it's all flour in there, and it'll thicken your sauce even more, and then it becomes kind of muddy. That's cooked enough. So with that, again, stock, the roux, make it, what did it take us here? Just a few minutes to make that sauce, and it's done. And then again, you go out to the dinner table and enjoy dinner with your family. I'm John Schiltz. This is your Inside Moment, and happy holidays.